Welcome to Inside Scoop Live, the podcast where indie authors get personal, sharing insights about their books, their writing journeys, and their passions. I'm your host, Sherry Hoyt, and I invite you to join me for engaging conversations with both debut indie authors and seasoned veterans. Whether you're looking for your next great read or a bit of inspiration, you've come to the right place. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Florence Wetzel returns to Inside Scoop Live to talk about her new book, Aspasia. It's a powerful tale of two unspeakable crimes that explores the depths of a mother's love and the extraordinary lengths one woman will go to safeguard her child. Before we get started, here's the inside scoop on the author. Florence Wetzel was born in Brooklyn, New York. She writes in different genres, including the memoir Sarah My Sarah, a memoir of friendship and loss. Her novels include the thriller The Woman Who Went Overboard, the Swedish mystery The Grand Man, and Dashiki, a cozy mystery. She has also authored horror short stories, a book of poems, and memoir essays, and she co-authored jazz clarinetist Perry Robinson's autobiography. Aspasia is her latest novel, published in July 2025. You can learn more about Florence Wetzel and her work at linktree.florencewetzel. Well, hi, Florence. Welcome back to Inside Scoop Live.
Hi, Sherry. It's great to be back again.
Let's jump into your latest book. What is Aspasia about, and what was your inspiration behind this story?
Aspasia is, if I had to give it a genre, I would call it like a literary thriller. It's not a mystery. There are two crimes in the book, but you know right away who did them. So it's not a mystery in that sense, but it is a thriller in the sense of there's suspense. I would say that. So the book takes place in Crete in the early 1990s, and it is a story of an American woman who has married a Cretan man and lives there, and they have a daughter together. She's 5 years old, and her name is Aspasia, so the book is named after her.
Mm-hmm.
And the main character, Katerina, her husband is away working on a cargo ship. And while he's away, something very shocking happens. And Katerina uncovers what I would call the village secret. And then she decides what she's going to do about it. So that's what the book is about. And my inspiration was I should fill in that I myself lived in Crete from 1990 to 1995.
Oh, wow.
And with much pain and effort, I learned Greek, and ultimately to my joy. But I read a book in Greek. It is called Astradini, which is a Greek name. It's also an unusual sort of name like Aspasia. It's not a
Yeah.
name you see a lot, like, Maria or Elena or something like that. And in that book, it's a book about a young girl whose family moves to Athens. And at the end of the book, she is subject to an attack. And the writer, she leaves the book there. That's how she ends the book.
Mm.
And it's the most shocking thing. I've never read that in a book. Like, there's no, like, what happens next? There's no sense of justice. It ends right there. And I was so impacted by that book. I found it so unsettling. And obviously, that was the writer's choice, which is a very interesting choice.
Yeah.
But it left me so uneasy that I wanted to write a book about a young girl in kind of a similar situation. I wanted to give it an ending, more or less. I wanted
Yeah.
who actually was protected. Yeah, so that was the original impulse behind my book, Aspasia.
Okay. I get that, though. I don't know if I've read any books like that, but I've seen movies like that, and it's like, what? You can't just
Right?
end there? I guess you're supposed to use your imagination. I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, the name Aspasia carries a lot of history and meaning. What made it the right choice for your book?
So I was inspired to use that name for two reasons. One is I know a real life Aspasia. I met her in the early 90s. I'm happy to report she's still alive. She's in
Yay.
her 80s now. One summer, I had a job helping to clean pottery where I lived. There was an archaeological team, and they have to take care of like everything they find. So there are all these like pottery shards, and so I was hired to hang out with a group of other women from my village, and we each had like a bucket and a toothbrush, and we cleaned these little shards of pottery. So I think there was about five of us, and one of them was a woman named Aspasia, and I honestly never met anyone else with that name. And she was just so funny. And she had so many great stories, and I just loved her. And she became my friend. And I just loved that name. I just thought it was so beautiful.
It
And
is.
then I didn't realize, because I must admit, I'm not such a student of history, but the real life Aspasia lived in, ooh, I think it's like the 5th century BC. And she was the, I don't know, say the lover of, courtesan of Pericles, the great Greek hero. And
Hmm.
then also I believe she had her own oratory school, and Plato mentions her in one of his dialogues. And there's books written about her, and so she's this very famous heroine actually in Greek history. And so someone told me once that Greeks, they like to name their children after great historical figures because it gives the children something to live up to. It's not meant as a burden, but
Mm.
it's something to live up to, and it connects you to the history of the country.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Yeah.
Isn't that cool? Yeah. So that's why also I wanted to name the little girl in the book Aspasia. And I would say there's a third reason. And this is something I've come upon recently. A lot of people think of like little girls as like very weak or like victims or, but
Hmm.
they're not. I think little girls are very strong, having been one myself, and you too. Like, I think we're very strong. We're very tough. And so my concept is also that the little girl Aspasia in the book, she's also a heroine.
Yeah. First of all, people don't give 5-year-olds enough credit in general, but especially girls, I think,
Right. Exactly, right? Because they're cute and they're pretty, they're in a dress. It's like, don't be fooled.
Yeah. Now you talked a little bit about your main character, Katerina. She's not from the village, but she's obviously made her home there, marrying a man from the village.
Mhm.
How does her outsider perspective kind of shape, and I don't know if outsider is the right word, but how does it shape the way she experiences the events of the novel?
That is a good question. It is very interesting because obviously in the book she's lived there for 7 years at this point. And I would say she has assimilated better than a lot of foreigners do. It's interesting because at that time in Greece, if you met a foreign woman, she was there because she was with a Greek man.
Mm,
Nowadays, because of the European Union and the, ease of travel, there's plenty of women who just come on their own. But the advantage, of course, to going there because of the man is that then you're folded into like a family. And I think you're folded into the village life or the city life, but in this case, the village life much quicker. So she is for an expat, an expatriate, I think she's very well integrated in the sense that she's learned the language. She has a child, which I think also makes you more in the society because then you're
hmm.
dealing with the schools and the other parents. And she also works. So in the book, her work is she teaches English to the local children. So in all of those senses, she is, very well assimilated. But she didn't grow up there. She's an American and she comes from a totally different point of view. And it comes up a few times in the book where she says, I'm not one of them and I never will be. And they know it and I know it. And that really is just how it is. And
Hmm.
I think that it's not just Greek culture, but many, many cultures, especially small villages. There's a lot unsaid that everybody knows, and people don't necessarily tell you. Even
Right.
her husband maybe doesn't even think to tell her, well, oh yeah, we do it this way, or we would never do that.
Yeah. In some ways, she's connected. Like she has her group, her circle, kind of
Hmm.
like that. I felt like she was very much a part of, but there's also always that, like you said, she's an American and she knows it and they know it. So, yeah.
Right. I would add, Greece has had a very difficult history in, well, the last century. In World War II was a very, very difficult time for them. I mean, people were like starving to death in Athens, and there was first the Italian occupation and then the German. And then, I don't know if a lot of people who aren't Greeks know this, but after World War II, there was a civil war in Greece.
Mm,
And as a result, there was a lot of poverty. And, while other countries were working on rebuilding, Greece was still fighting and they were fighting each other. And as a result, they were kind of, at a different place than a lot of other places in Europe. And then, of course, there was the dictatorship
hmm.
in the 70s, which was also like a horrible time in Greek history.
Yeah.
So, for a little village in Crete, which, as we know, is, you would say it's like the bottom island in Greece, sometimes it takes a while for more modern ideas to get, you
Right.
know, Right? And I think that's true probably of a lot of countries. I think even of Sweden, there's some villages that just kind of modern ideas and modern ways of doing things can take a while to actually reach them. And the other thing to remember about this book is it takes place in 1992. So that is, for
Hmm.
those of us who remember, the time before the internet, before cell phones, even before like really faxes.
Right.
So there wasn't a lot of information and ideas coming from outside
Right.
to a small
Right.
village.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting to talk about your book without talking about what happened.
Right, right. I know.
But we just can't, listeners, so bear
Right.
with us. But when something happens, we'll just call it
Hmm.
that. Katerina, she shows that she's a survivor. I mean, she's strong, but she's vulnerable as well. What is it that you wanted readers to understand about her?
I think just that she is not going to do what she learns other women, not just women, but people in the village have done before, where they more or less know the truth about what's gone on, but they choose to ignore it
Mm,
because if it was true, it would sort of upend the whole structure of the village. So she is in this unusual situation. So she does it new school in the sense that she's like, I'm not going to give in to this. I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen. But she does it old school in the sense that she finds her way to get revenge. And one thing
yeah.
about Crete is, I don't really go into this in the book, but it has a very long history of like feuds,
Mm,
like family feuds going for like centuries. That doesn't go on nowadays. As far as I know, maybe there's some little remnants of it, but that used to be a very common thing about, taking justice into your own hands. So she's actually very much part of the Cretan tradition when she does that,
mm.
even though she's also fighting against the tradition of you don't say anything, you pretend it's not happening, that kind of thing.
Right. Let's talk about Aspasia. To me, it felt like she was kind of in the background. We heard from her a little bit, but mostly she was like a secondary character. So, in other words, I guess she didn't really drive the story, but the story was
Right,
because of her.
right.
How do you see her role in the story?
Which it's really interesting that you bring this up because it never occurred to me. It's occurring to me now to do one of those things where, like, I tell the story partly from her perspective. But that didn't occur to me because it seemed more to be about Katerina, her mother, and how she was going to handle things. And, Aspasia being a 5-year-old, her living, growing up in a small village, her world is pretty simple. And even though this very complicated thing happens to her, she deals with it as a child does.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I see what you're saying. Like the book is named after her and the book is about her, but it's not like she's not the main character. It's her mom who is.
Yeah,
Um,
which I liked. I thought that was very interesting, but so that was just kind of the feeling that I got. And that's the thing, right? Every reader interprets it differently. Yeah,
exactly. And yet there wouldn't be a story without her. And it is her story.
right.
So it's her and her mother. Like it's really very much, the link between them and what her mother does for her.
Yeah. So the husband's away. We don't hear from him at all. But talk about Katerina's father-in-law, Christos. He's a powerful old man villager. I mean, everybody knows him.
Right.
Um, what were you exploring in his character?
I see him as a bad man. He's a bad man and he's a bully. It's really interesting because people talk about bullying and mostly talk about like kids, but there's adult bullies.
Oh
And
yeah.
it can be like at the workplace, it can be at the golf club, it can be, and
I mean,
um
kids get it from someplace, right?
exactly, right? And I guess another way to look at it would be sort of like a social power. So Christos is, I see him as just like this very arrogant man who's just always gotten his own way. And, he grew up in that village. He's very comfortable there. And he just, like, he's arrogant. He's always gotten what he wanted, and nobody has ever really challenged him. And
Hmm.
he's just this, if you call him a psychopath, maybe more like a sociopath, he's just this blown up, arrogant,
Hmm.
bad man. And one of the things that I thought about is that I find it interesting that it's often the most psychologically unstable person who has all the power and everyone dances around them. That can be in a family, again, job, it can be in a whole country. And so that's how I see him. Like everybody's afraid of him.
Mm.
So he can do what he wants. And you know, it's really interesting. Just a couple months ago, I watched the Netflix series Maestro in Blue. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh, I haven't.
It's really good. That is the first Greek Netflix show. It was actually made for Greek TV, but Netflix picked it up. And
Oh,
I
okay.
was delighted to see that there is like a Christos-like character in that story as well. So that
Oh,
really affirmed to me because again, it's in a small village, a small island in that case. Everybody knows what's going on, but for various reasons, nobody does anything. I mean, Greece has changed a lot, but it was a very patriarchal society, like many countries.
mm-hmm.
And the men's voices were louder and stronger, and the women didn't feel like they had a voice to protest. So when I saw that series, I thought, yeah, this is what it is. It's like the traditional, like, bad man bully of the village. So
Yeah,
I
exactly.
wanted to show that, but then show how you could take down someone like that, which is what happens in the book.
Yeah. Just have to get a little creative.
Right, exactly.
I feel like the secrets are just like everywhere in the story, like
Mm,
family secrets, community secrets. Katerina has
yeah.
secrets. What interests you most about the tension between what's revealed and what's hidden?
I think that one of the really interesting things that literature can do or art can do, I can see movies doing this and, plays and everything, that the reader can know something that the other characters don't know.
Mm,
So that creates a real tension because there's this like layers of truth going on. And that sets up a really nice tension too, because it's like, okay, the reader knows that this is going on, but they don't know about that. Are they going to find out about it? Are they not going to find out about it? And then you drop clues. It's literature, but I think it happens a lot in real life too. You know how it is that someone tells you something, you're like, oh, that makes total sense. Now I understand what's been going on for the last 20 years. I
yeah.
mean, people keep secrets or, certain information it's not freely shared because it's painful or, for any number of reasons. So I find that really interesting, and I think it works very well in setting up a novel or literary fiction.
Right, right. I also think that, kind of related to that, the silence, like people can
Mm.
kind of pick up what's not being said, in the silence.
It's interesting. I just saw Mike Lee's movie from the mid 90s called Secret and Lies. I really recommend that. It's really good. You can rent it on Amazon. But now that you're saying this, it's about these three families and the secrets that are between them. And you're right, like you have this like sense of things that something's off. And it
Yeah.
comes up in little bits, but you don't know it. That movie is great. And by the end, like everything's out in the open, but just the process of getting there is really fascinating. But there's so much unsaid. And in a little village, too, there can just be a lot of unsaid.
Mhm.
But that affects everyone. It's like invisible gas. Like everyone's affected by it, but you don't see it. You
Mm.
maybe don't even have a name for it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
The book shows how quickly comfort can turn into fear. Once
mm.
Katerina learns the village secret, how did you use the shift in the daily routine to build the suspense? Because, like you said, it's not a mystery, but it is suspenseful and there's a lot of tension.
Well, I think that that is really like one of the most disturbing things that can happen to people is that you have your daily routine. And in the case of Katerina, she's living in this small village where there literally is no sense of danger. Maybe there's danger in the sense of like nature or something, but there's no sense of danger. And to go from this sense of complete freedom and complete safety to danger, where suddenly, exactly as you're saying, like your daily routine takes on, this element of like, oh no, I can't go that way because I'm going to run into him. And what if these people see me doing this? Something like that happens at your job, like a new person starts and, maybe you don't get along with them. And next thing you know, you don't feel comfortable in the lunchroom anymore and
Mm,
you don't want to walk down this one hallway. Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
it can be like that. And it's such a sad thing too, because it's like your sense of wholeness and safety is ruined. So I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to show how suddenly these things that before were harmless are suddenly infused with danger and how disturbing that can be. And then in Katerina's case, her understanding that, but her 5-year-old daughter not understanding that. But even she eventually begins to understand it's not business as usual. We need to do
Mm-hmm.
things differently. So
Yeah. And that goes to back what we were saying earlier. We don't give them enough credit, but kids pick up on things.
I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, they do pick up on things,
Yeah.
definitely, even if they can't put it into words, but you can see it, you know?
Yeah. So the subject matter of the book is very serious, but there
Mhm.
are moments of humor and warmth. And why was it
Yes.
important to you to weave in those lighter moments into the story?
I think partly because I think that is just how life is, you know?
Mm.
There are, these really intense and painful and things that happen that shake your foundation. I have this friend, Monica, in Sweden. She's funny. She talks about the big life and the little life, and the little life, it doesn't mean less than, but just like the little things in your life that you enjoy and give you comfort.
Oh, I like
So,
that.
and I think that also in a book like this, in my opinion and my choice, if it's constantly about, this bad thing that happens and the fear, it's a bit too much. And so I think it gave a relief to me as the person writing it, but also the reader that it's interspersed with, for instance, Katerina goes to Aunt Harah's house and Aunt Harah lives with her older mother, Yaya, the grandmother, and they're two people that love to fight, and Katerina goes there and sort of like, plays, referee between them. And also her husband, as we said, he's not there, but his best friend is this very like tall, sexy Greek guy that pops up in the book once in a while. And yeah, I guess there are kind of comic relief, hopefully sort of naturally, but just,
Yeah.
life goes on. Even when something earth-shattering happens like it does in the book, like, life goes on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that it also expresses that as well. And I think it makes the book bearable. I mean, I would say it was a hard book to write in certain ways because of the difficult themes. And I know certain parts of it, particularly one little chapter, is very difficult to read. But I feel like those moments of lightness and other human connection give the reader a kind of soft landing.
Yeah. I like what you say about, well, that's how life is too, because that's true.
Hmm.
I mean, that's important. And then as a reader, I experience what's happening in the book. And
Hmm.
so those moments of, let's call it relief, are important, to me because,
Yes,
ooh, how much more tension can I take?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about what you wrote an article about recently about trigger warnings. How did you
Mm.
decide about what to share about the content in that manner?
You know, It's so interesting because I originally wrote this book in the early 90s, and I don't even know if the word trigger warning was around then. I just never thought
Right.
of it. But now, obviously, that is something people talk about, and a lot of books and a lot of movies have them. So when I was revising the book, it was in the back of my mind like, oh, should this have a trigger warning? And I did a lot of thinking about it and I read a lot about it. I Googled, there's a lot of really interesting articles about
Mm.
it. And here's the thing, like I say in the article, like if your book is about a center for domestic violence, and that's like part of, when you describe it, like a woman at a center for domestic violence becomes involved with one of her patients. The trigger warning is in the description. So
Mm.
you don't need that. Like people know, oh, okay, maybe I'll steer clear of that, or oh, that sounds interesting,
Yeah.
or even I've had that experience, so I want to read about it. But in my case, in the case of Aspasia, the trigger warning will reveal the plot and totally, take away the
Yeah.
shock value and just because I think the shock value is not just like the shock for the reader, it's for the main character. So, you see her shock and you feel the shock at the same time. I think that makes it more impactful. So ultimately decided not to have a trigger warning, but, the clue is kind of in the name. I have a new subtitle, A Novel of Suspense and Secrets. And then the very gifted writer, C. Fitton, she wrote a really nice blurb for the book. And she mentions, darkness. And also, one of the things that someone wrote in one of the articles I wrote, which I thought was so interesting, they said, if you're lucky enough that people read your book and then write about it on Goodreads, like a lot of times people in those places will say, trigger warning or
Hmm.
something. So the information is out there. I'm not trying to hide it.
Right.
And there've been some reviews of the book, and people do talk about it, and they're like, "This is, an intense subject matter." But Sherry, this is where I have to say that you came through for me with just the most wonderful trigger warning that did not reveal the plot. Oh my
Like I said
goodness,
in the
what did
beginning, it's hard to talk about the book without revealing too
yeah.
much, you
But
know?
it concerns, I think basically what you said is it concerns the child's welfare. So it's sort of,
Mm.
like I'll have to tell you, I'm very sensitive to things with children, but I'm really sensitive to things also with animals.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't like reading about people doing bad things to animals. So that is the kind of thing I would either A, steer clear of it, or if I start to read a passage that I can tell is like that, I just skip over it. So I think there's a lot of ways of handling, but I think, trigger warnings are very interesting. Someone wrote a review on Goodreads. They're like, this book should have had a trigger warning, and other people didn't feel that way. So I think it's an ongoing conversation, and every
Yeah.
writer needs to find what they're comfortable with.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you mentioned you've been working on updating editions of work that you've done like over like 20, 30 years ago. How does it feel now to have Aspasia updated and presented to a whole new audience, basically?
I have to say, I'm very happy. It's a whole new world out there in terms of being an independent author. There was no such thing as an independent author
Right.
back then. I don't know if you would remember that. And I don't know if the young ones know this. It's interesting for them maybe to hear the history, but it used to be called vanity press. If you published something on your own, not through a traditional publisher, it was known as vanity press, and it was looked down on. It
Mm-hmm.
was almost like the book didn't exist. And even though there's a fine tradition of people doing that, Virginia Woolf and Henry David Thoreau published Walden through his own funds, but it
Yeah.
was really looked down on. But now it's a whole new world. And just even you and I doing this, I mean, you have this wonderful business where you help independent writers do marketing.
Yeah, that didn't
It's really
exist
cool.
30 years
Yeah.
ago.
So for me now to be able to book the book out and to be able to talk about it and to get reviewers, I'm delighted. And I'm really delighted by the response to the book, of people reading it and discussing it. I'm really, really happy it's out in the world with a chance. Now it's got a chance to get readers and to get reviews. So
Yeah.
that's all I ever really wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's next for you?
So I had six older books that I'm doing this with that I'm revising and then putting new covers on. So Aspasia was number two of six. So the next one I will be putting out in January. So you'll be hearing from me then. It's called Holy Denver, a
Oh,
novel of shame and redemption. So we'll talk about that more in 6 months. But after that book, I have another book that's set in Crete. It's called Mrs. Papadakis, and that is a much lighter version of life in Crete.
I
So,
love that. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm excited about that one too. So, yeah, so that's what's coming up. So I'm just reading these books over and over again, making little changes, trying to improve it. I have covers for all of them with my wonderful cover graphic artist who I've been working with.
Oh, nice.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna do two a year. So this is gonna keep me busy for the next 2 years.
Yeah, yeah. How did you decide which ones to rewrite in which order? Or did you just do it in the order they were written?
I have to tell you, I decided on Dashiki first. Dashiki, A Cozy Mystery. I put that one out in January of this year because it needed the least amount of work. It was in the best shape.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then I picked Aspasia because it was the shortest one. I didn't have to do a lot of rewriting. So I thought, let me start with the quote unquote easier ones. So that's why I started with them.
Okay, okay.
And
Ease yourself
yeah,
back into things. Yeah, yeah. Makes sense.
exactly. That's why, yes.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Well, Florence, did you have anything else you wanted to add today?
I would just say again that I'm really grateful for you and for readers' views. It's always a pleasure to work with you. It's just like part of my marketing now that I contact you and get things rolling. So thank you for providing this forum.
Oh, well, thank you. We're honored to do so. Thank you so much for joining me today for my interview with Florence Wetzel, author of Aspasia. To learn more about Florence Wetzel and her work, visit linktree.florencewetzel. And be sure to check out our other interviews at InsideScoopLive.com.